All right, so are you ready to travel back in time with us? Today we're going deep into the Kingdom of Congo,
Really diving deep.
and I guarantee it's going to be a lot more interesting than whatever you learned about it in your history textbook.
Definitely more interesting. Yeah, we're using all kinds of sources,
Okay.
historical accounts, museum resources, and scholarly articles to put together this kingdom story. And trust me, it's both complex and incredibly fascinating.
So to kick things off, I think we should address this big misconception that's out there.
Okay.
You know, the one about pre-colonial Africa just being a bunch of isolated tribes?
Yeah, we need to bust that myth right away.
Yeah.
The Kingdom of Congo was powerful and centralized,
Wow.
not a small, isolated tribe at all.
So not at all what people usually think of.
No, we're talking a kingdom that spanned a huge area,
Okay.
what we now know as Angola, the DRC, and the Republic of Congo.
So a major player in Africa.
Definitely a major player.
But how do we know that? What evidence do we have?
Well, we've got accounts from those early European visitors. Oh.
Okay. You know, when the Portuguese sailors landed on the shores of Congo back in 1483,
Yeah.
they were blown away by what they found.
Really?
This wasn't some primitive outpost.
Right.
They encountered a sophisticated society with a well-established system of governance.
So what did this society actually look like? I mean, did they have palaces or big cities?
Picture the capital city in Banza, Congo.
Okay.
A Milanese ambassador back in 1491 actually compared it to Evora,
And what was that?
a really prestigious royal residence in Portugal.
Wow. Okay.
So that comparison tells you a lot about how developed and grand the Congo Kingdom was.
So they were thriving.
Thriving, not just surviving.
Yeah, but I have a feeling things were about to get complicated when the Portuguese showed up, right? I mean, we've seen this story before.
You're right. Whenever different cultures clash, especially when they have different goals, things get interesting.
Yeah.
And the Portuguese arriving in Congo was no exception.
So set the stage for us. What happens when these two worlds meet?
It wasn't just a straightforward conquest or domination. The Congolese weren't just going to give in.
Right, they had their own systems and culture and goals.
Exactly. They had built this incredible kingdom.
Yeah.
And I doubt they were eager to hand over the reins to newcomers.
So how did they handle this relationship with the Portuguese? Did they resist them directly?
They actually took a more strategic approach.
Oh, interesting. Like what?
Well, take the conversion of King Nzinga Nku to Catholicism in 1491.
He converted,
He even adopted the name Juan.
mirroring the Portuguese king.
Exactly.
That's a big step.
Historians think Nzinga Nku saw some strategic advantages in aligning with Christianity.
Like what?
He might have seen it as a way to strengthen ties with Portugal, to access their knowledge and technology.
So it was kind of like, let's see what we can get out of this new relationship.
Exactly. It really shows their diplomatic skills and willingness to adapt
Makes sense.
and get this young Congolese people who were educated in Europe.
Wait, they sent students to Europe? They were involved in writing letters between the Congo king and the Portuguese court.
That's incredible.
That's cultural exchange on a whole other level.
So they weren't just reacting to the Portuguese, they were actively trying to understand them.
You got it. This wasn't passive acceptance at all.
Wow.
They were engaging and trying to find the best way to navigate this new reality.
And did that continue under the next king?
It did. This engagement carried on under King Nzinga. Nku's successor, King Afonso.
Okay.
He's a key figure in this story, a great example of Congo's strength and strategic thinking.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more about Afonso. What made him such a remarkable leader?
Well, he kept embracing Christianity.
Okay.
He saw it as a useful tool for his kingdom.
Right.
But he was also fiercely protective of Congo's autonomy.
So he wanted the benefits of a relationship with Portugal.
Right, but without becoming subservient to them.
That's tricky. How did he manage that?
He was a master diplomat.
Okay, I like it.
Here's an example. Afonso sent his son Henrique all the way to the Vatican to become a bishop in 1513.
Wow, all the way to the Vatican. What was the goal there?
He had a vision to establish an independent Congolese church,
Ah, okay.
like the Portuguese church.
I see.
He saw it as a way for Congo to assert its own religious authority.
So less dependence on Portugal.
Exactly. You see, sending his son to become a bishop wasn't just about embracing Christianity.
It was strategic.
He was creating a power structure within Congo that could counter Portuguese influence.
That's some serious planning. So did it work? Did Henrique actually become a bishop?
He did. He even got a special status called in partibus infidelium.
What does that mean?
It's Latin.
Okay.
And it basically meant he was a bishop in a non-Christian land.
Ah, I see.
This status gave him the power to appoint Congolese priests.
Wow, so Afonso's goal of a more independent church was moving forward.
Exactly.
It's amazing how they were operating at such a high level,
Right.
strategically navigating all these complex religious and political situations.
Hmm.
But I'm guessing the Portuguese weren't thrilled with this whole independence thing, were they?
You're right, Afonso. I was constantly pushing back against their attempts to control things,
Like what kind of things?
especially trade, and most importantly, the slave trade.
Yeah, that was a huge issue.
A major point of contention.
This is a difficult part of the story.
Yeah.
I mean, even as they were striving for independence, they were still participating in a system that caused so much suffering.
Unfortunately, yes. Even at this early stage, thousands of slaves were being sold from Congo every year,
Oh, wow.
mostly to work on those brutal sugar plantations in São Tomé.
So it shows those complex and exploitative dynamics were already at play.
Exactly.
Afonso's efforts to maintain Congo's independence were commendable.
Definitely.
But this part of the story is hard to reconcile with those efforts.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder about the moral dilemmas they faced.
It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white.
Right.
These were complex situations with no easy answers.
So even while navigating this relationship with Portugal, they were also grappling with the horrors of the slave trade.
A complicated time for sure.
But the story doesn't end there, right? What happened next?
These tensions just escalated in the following centuries.
Oh, no.
But the Kingdom of Congo didn't back down. They had some really clever strategies, and they weren't afraid to fight back.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of strategies are we talking about? Did they go to war with Portugal?
Well, they were about to become masters of diplomacy,
Okay.
and their ambassadors, let's just say they made waves in Europe,
Challenging the narrative.
and leaving their mark on history.
So we left off with the Congo becoming masters of diplomacy and their ambassadors really making a splash in Europe.
It's true. As Portuguese aggression got worse in the early 17th century,
Okay.
the Kingdom of Congo started using European diplomacy as a way to resist.
So they were taking the initiative.
Exactly. They weren't just reacting to Portuguese pressure, they were shaping the situation to their advantage.
That's clever.
And there's one ambassador whose story is amazing.
Oh, yeah?
Antonio Manuel, he was sent to Rome in 1604 to deal with Portuguese hostility and power struggles with a Portuguese-appointed bishop.
That's a tough job.
Talk about a high-pressure assignment.
What was his journey like? I bet it wasn't just a simple trip across the Mediterranean.
It was a real adventure. On his way to Europe, he stopped in Brazil
Okay.
and managed to free an enslaved Congolese noble.
Wow, good for him. Then what?
Then his ship was attacked by Dutch pirates.
Pirates. Seriously. Was that common back then?
It was a dangerous time to be at sea,
I bet.
but Antonio Manuel was resourceful. He escaped the pirate attack
That's incredible.
and eventually made it to Rome in 1608.
So he did make it.
But sadly, he died shortly after arriving.
Oh, that's tragic. But even though his time in Rome was short, he must have made an impact.
Absolutely. He left a lasting impression on the Europeans he met.
So
They were really impressed by his sophistication, his strong faith, and his diplomatic skills.
he challenged their perceptions of Africa.
Exactly. There's even a marble bust of him in Rome to this day.
That's a powerful symbol of his legacy. But diplomatic missions were only one part of their resistance, right? I mean, they had to deal with Portuguese aggression back home, too.
Right. They weren't just playing defense, they fought back when they had to.
Oh,
King Pedro II actually led a successful military campaign against Portuguese forces in 1623.
they defeated the Portuguese.
Yeah.
That's surprising. I'm so used to hearing about European victories in these situations. How did they pull that off?
They were strategic about it. They appealed to the Pope and the King of Spain,
Okay.
arguing that the Portuguese governor had violated Christian territory.
And it worked.
It did. Over 1,000 Congolese prisoners were even returned from Brazil because of papal intervention.
Wow. They really knew how to play the game. Using European powers against each other, leveraging their Christian faith and winning military victories. It seems like they were constantly adapting and finding new ways to push back against the Portuguese.
They were masters of realpolitik. They understood that to survive in this changing world, they needed to be flexible, to form strategic alliances and to fight back when necessary.
But this success story, I have a feeling, might have a darker side.
Yeah.
As the Congo gained power through trade, did a new threat emerge?
Unfortunately, yes. As we move into the late 19th century, the balance of power shifts dramatically.
Oh.
A new era of colonialism is on the horizon.
And that's not good.
And with it, a whole new set of challenges for the Congo Kingdom.
So what happens? What causes this turning point?
Well, after the transatlantic slave trade ended,
Okay.
Congolese communities started trading with Western nations.
Oh, so new trading partners.
They were supplying resources like palm oil, ivory, and rubber.
Okay.
And at first, they were in a pretty good position.
So they weren't being exploited by these new partners. They still had control.
For sure, Congolese chiefs set the terms of trade.
How so?
They decided where Europeans could go, what they could buy, and how much they'd pay.
Smart.
They knew the value of their resources and their strategic location.
Do you have any specific examples of how they exerted this control?
Definitely take the Hatton and Cookson Company,
Who were they?
a British trading firm.
Okay.
They were only allowed to operate at a specific spot on the Chiluwango River.
And if they tried to go further?
They'd be met by guards armed with poisoned arrows.
Wow, they meant business. But this level of control couldn't last forever, could it?
You're right. The 1880s mark a darker turn.
What happened?
European powers, driven by greed and a hunger for expansion, got a lot more aggressive.
So the stakes got higher.
Definitely.
So what changed? What caused this power shift?
Well, European powers started using trickery and coercion.
Oh no.
Congolese chiefs were often tricked into signing treaties they didn't understand.
Treaties that gave away their power.
Exactly. Treaties that essentially handed over their sovereignty.
So they were pressured into signing these treaties they didn't even understand.
That's a classic colonial move.
Taking advantage like that.
It's a prime example of how these powers forced their way into Africa.
Yeah, and we can't forget about that Berlin Conference in 1885.
Oh, absolutely. That was a major turning point for the whole continent.
The scramble for Africa.
European powers just carving up Africa among themselves,
With no regard for the people living there.
completely ignoring existing kingdoms and communities.
How did this impact Congo specifically?
Their territory was split between Belgium, France, and Portugal.
So even more outsiders.
And with this division came violence, exploitation, and the loss of their independence.
It's really sad to see how this once powerful kingdom that navigated European interactions for centuries
I know.
was ultimately brought down by greed.
And it really makes you think.
It does. What if things had gone differently?
The Congo story reminds us that history isn't inevitable.
Right.
It's a result of choices and actions, and those have consequences.
It's so true.
And while there's tragedy in their story, there are also moments of resilience, innovation, strategic brilliance.
Absolutely. From embracing Christianity to sending ambassadors to forming alliances, even winning battles against European powers, they showed strength and adaptability. What do you think is the biggest takeaway from their story?
I think it challenges those oversimplified narratives about Africa's past.
Yeah, the ones that paint a very one-sided picture.
The Congos weren't just victims of colonialism, they were actively shaping their destiny.
They were making their own choices.
They were diplomats, warriors, traders, innovators.
So much more than just a conquered people.
Their story, with all its complexity and nuance, deserves to be heard and remembered.
Well said. It's a testament to the richness and complexity of African history long before European influence.
Long before.
And it reminds us that history is never just one side of the story.
Never.
We need to understand different perspectives and recognize the achievements of people from all over the world.
Exactly. The legacy of Congo and countless other pre-colonial African societies continues to shape our world today.
It's still relevant.
It's crucial to engage with that history, to learn from it, and to let it challenge our assumptions.
About the past and the present. I couldn't agree more. The Congo story shows us there's always more to discover.
Always.
More to learn. It makes us curious.
That's the key.
To dig deeper, question what we think we know, and keep exploring history's fascinating tapestry.
That's what it's all about.